But when we get to the actual tuning, this will make a lot more sense because it's all things that we should go over. So try and follow along with me. If you have any questions because you're confused, please just raise your hand and I'll try and explain it the best I can. So just a short overview of some of the things that we're going to go over. We'll see this all again. So this is something that I really wanted to talk about as a portion of my Marimba tuning, all my timpani stuff. It's the culmination of different areas of instrument repair and mentors. So I want to talk a little bit about my mentors. Ryan Mintz, a piano technician. This semester, I'm taking a piano tuning class with him, and I've been working on fixing pianos with him for the last year. The reason I was able to learn how to tune marimbas is because I got a basic understanding of how things vibrate and how to tune things with him. I read a bunch of research articles for like 3 weeks straight, and I would not have understood a single word of it if it wasn't for the fact that I'd gone over that and I had another person that I could talk to. And I just think there's been so many things that I've come across in percussion repair and all that stuff that had transferred over from other people. Things that I've learned from Samson I've used in percussion repair. Things that I've used from mix I've used for bending the tension rods back in place. I just kind of wanted to point out how important this was, and I wanted to give Mix a little shout out because he really helped me understand this. Now the big question, how and why do marimbas go out of tune, and why is it important to tune them? Who thinks they know why a marimba goes out of tune?
One reason is humidity changes over a long period of time.
The humidity changes?
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah. So the humidity changes, and that'll affect it on the day-to-day and the week-to-week. And if it's in one room and the humidity is staying generally the same, it's going to stay around probably the same, like 5 to 10 hertz. Every single marimba in this school is 15 cents sharp, and they haven't been tuned before. There's a very particular reason for that, and I found this in my research articles, and it is why being able to tune marimbas is important. Obviously, all of these bars are treated bars so that they last longer. In the factories, the process that they use to treat the bars makes them have a higher moisture content when they tune them compared to 3 months later when they get sent out in the real world. They have an artificially high moisture content to pretty much anywhere that they're going to be stored. And we're going to talk about some properties, but when the moisture content is higher, the wood is holding water in it, which means it has a higher mass. And that's the important thing that we want to remember as to why that makes a difference. So first we're going to talk how the bar vibrates. And there's 2 key things that we need to understand when talking about this. We have nodes and we have antinodes. Does anybody know what a node is? So a node is the portion of the bar that is not moving at all. On a piano, for example, the nodes are at the end where they're holding the strings. Wind instruments and marimba bars are not like that at all. And then the antinode is the place between 2 nodes where the bar is vibrating the most amount. It seems a little weird because you would think that the node is the part where it's vibrating, but the antinode is the part where it's not vibrating, so it's vibrating the most. And we just want to remember that. So when we're playing the marimba, we want to aim for a key spot on the bar as percussionists, and that's about right there. And we'll talk about that a little bit later and why that's important. So this marimba bar is vibrating in a bunch of different ways simultaneously at the same time, kind of like a piano string if you've ever looked at that. This is the first and most important way that it's vibrating. You can see my little animated diagrams up here. For the fundamental, or the first transverse mode, it vibrates in about 12 observable different ways, but only 3 of them are important for tuning, and we're going to go over those ones. We'll notice that the middle of the bar is vibrating the most, and we have it labeled as the antinode at the bottom. The nodes are not vibrating at all, and then it's vibrating up and down a little bit on the outside. Who can see what is on the bar in the middle picture there? Does anybody know what that is? Salt. It's salt. Does anybody know why we might put salt there, or why? Who notices what the salt's lining up with on the picture below it? The nodes, yes. So if the bar is moving up and down both ways, the salt is going to gather at a point where it's not vibrating. So if I take this bar, and I take some salt that I stole from the pack.
Can we put on a
Yeah, you guys can come up for a second. lines of those salts there. So that is how we find the nodes of the different portions and the modes of those. Yes, now we have the second transverse mode. You can see how it's vibrating up there. Well, notice that this one features 3 nodes and 2 antinodes. Why are there 2 antinodes?
Because there's 3 nodes, so there's 2 spaces in
Because there's
between.
3 nodes. The antinode is the portion of the bar that is vibrating the most between 2 nodes. So because there's 3 nodes, there's 2 places where it's vibrating the most because it's got to cut in half. And we'll notice and see how that's vibrating there. Take note of where the antinodes are because they're going to be important for tuning later on. We have the third transverse mode, and this is the third way that it moves when we're talking about tuning. And we'll notice that this features 4 nodes and 3 antinodes. We can see salt lining up in 4 places and how it's moving there. You'll notice that this mode shares, the vibration shares an antinode with the fundamental at the center. We'll see that. And on the next page here, we're going to have a picture of all 3 of them next to each other. You can see the difference. So we're going to talk about all 3 tuning modes at the same time. So, as percussionists, like I said, we want to find the part of the bar that can excite the most amount of notes. Right here. What do we notice if we look at the diagram? What do we notice about this spot? What is not in this spot for any of the 3 modes?
Nodes.
Yes, there's no nodes. So I can hit here and activate all of them. Who's ever been told don't hit a marimba bar in the center? Right? You don't hit a marimba bar in the center. Now you might be wondering, if we want the fundamental, wouldn't we want to hit it in the center to make the fundamental the lattice? But it doesn't sound good, and that's because what's in the middle of the bar on the secondary mode? A node. So if I hit in the middle, I'll hear the fundamental, but not the overtones. Yeah. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah.
You'll see why we're talking about this in this next portion.
Because you know you're in a science lesson.
Yeah. Recap. This is really important. I'm not trying to call you all dumb, but I'm going to have these recap questions because it's the key information from this portion that you're going to need to know to understand what's happening next. What's a node and an antinode?
Nodes are where no vibration happens.
Yes, nodes are where no vibration happens.
Spot between them.
Yes, and the antinode is where it's vibrating the most. What happens to the fundamental when we stop the antinode from vibrating? I didn't bring this up, but it was on one of the slides. Does anybody know? Brody?
We don't hear it.
Yes, if the part of the bar that is vibrating the most for a specific overtone or fundamental can't vibrate, the antinode of the fundamental is in the middle. If I'm making it so the middle can't vibrate, you're not going to hear the fundamental. And we'll see why that's important in the next section. Now we're going to talk about how to hear each mode. If we're tuning and we need to tune each of these modes, we need to find a way to hear each individual one, right? So, the first transverse mode for the fundamental is an easy one. We can just hit it. You can hit it in the center, you can hit it off. The fundamental is naturally always the loudest. It's the lowest and easiest to hear, so we don't have to worry about not hearing any of the other modes in order to tune this, right? We can very clearly hear what pitch this is. We don't really need to worry about anything else with that. The second transverse mode is responsible for the fundamentals that are 2 octaves above the fundamental. So, if I pinch in the middle where the node is, if I hold at a node, what's going to happen? If I hold at the node of a specific pitch, what's going to happen to that pitch? This is a trick question. So if I'm holding the overtone of this node, will it affect that node, that pitch vibrating?
Not supposed to vibrate.
No, that part doesn't vibrate. So if I hold at the node, it'll sound. That's why with the fundamental, the string holes are where the nodes are, because the strings can hold up the bar without affecting the resonating, without affecting it from sounding. Yeah, there we go. So, how would I hear the first set of overtones, but not hear the fundamentals? So I'll hold the middle, and why am I going to hold the middle? Yes, because by holding in the middle, remember the antinode of the fundamental is in the middle, and if we're holding it, you can't hear the fundamental. But there's a node for the second mode, which means holding it at the node will make it so it can sound like normal. So we have the normal, then if I hold the center, and you can hear 2 octaves above. This one is not actually 2 octaves above, and I'll get to that why. This older style of marimba, they don't tune the overtones, which is why we're using them for practice, because we can ruin them. They're not being used for anything. But yeah, so we have the regular. It's not really cool. So now we have the third transverse mode. This bar is very, very hard to hear it on, but we're going to hold it at the top because there's a node there. You'll notice the nodes for the third mode are farther out than the string holes are. So I can hold it there to allow that to vibrate. The second mode won't vibrate because I'm going to hit in the center. And what's at the center of the second mode? A node. So hitting it there won't activate the second one. And then you might have noticed on the diagrams, but they're vibrating in the middle and they're also vibrating at the end of the bars. So by holding it towards the end, I'm dampening the fundamental enough to hear the overtone. We probably will not hear it on this bar. It's normally only in the lowest ones, but you kind of hear it ring over in the background. The higher the bars go up, the less overtones you tune. So this is a higher bar. You really only tune that third one in the low octave of a 5 octave. So we can barely hear it here, but we don't really need to for tuning. Yeah. Now we're going to talk about how to change the bar's pitch. You guys see how I'm talking about we're only like 18 slides in and we haven't tuned the marimba bar yet? So we need to remove wood. You might ask, well, removing wood, do we have to add wood to make it go the other way? So there's two main properties that come into contact here when we're tuning. We talk about the mass and the flexibility. The mass of the bar affects the pitch. That's why bigger bar, that's why you have different size bars. And then the flexibility of the bar, how easily it can vibrate in the middle. Remember what I talked about earlier when the process of treating this wood made it have a higher moisture content and it made it have a higher mass. When that water evaporates out and the mass lowers, the pitch raises because how heavy the bar is affects the sound. So when we're tuning, we'll find we can do it in two ways. Removing wood between the strings changes the flexibility that allows the bar to vibrate more. And if it can vibrate easier, is it going to vibrate at a slower or a faster pitch? If it's easier to vibrate, can it vibrate? If something's really hard to vibrate, it would vibrate at a higher pitch. If it's easier to vibrate, sorry, not a faster, so a higher or a lower pitch. And if it's easy to vibrate, it can go at a lower pitch. And then by removing wood from the outside, we can affect the mass of the bar, but not the flexibility. And it'll make the pitch raise because we're making the bar weigh less. So, just a little recap here. To raise the pitch of the bar, we need to lower the mass. And with that, we're going to use a belt table. So, as you can see, this table's normally on carpet. That doesn't happen. Getting wood from the outside, and that's going to affect the pitch. Then, if we want to raise the mass of the bar, where do we need to remove wood? From the middle. Yeah, so it can flex more. So that process is going to be now, something important is the pitch raises when we're shading wood between based on where the antinode is. If that part of the bar is vibrating the most, when you remove wood from that spot, it's going to change the most. So if we notice the diagrams over here, see how there's a 1 on the bottom? Yeah. Look up at the top diagram. What does that line up with for the fundamental? The antinode. So we shave there to change the fundamental. Look at the 2s. Where do those line up with? The antinode of the other ones. And then the 3s on the outside line up with those antinodes. So we shave wood off at the antinodes of each specific pitch to change the pitch of those. Now you may notice when we shave wood from the outside, we're lowering the mass and raising the pitch. It's going to raise the pitch of all of the fundamental and the overtones. So we can't change those individually, but we can change these individually. Because what happens if I shave wood in the middle? It'll raise the fundamental, but there's a node for the second overtone, which means it's not going to affect it. That part doesn't vibrate. So we can move them individually. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we start to tune this out. Removing wood from the nodes. Exactly what I was doing here. What's going to happen if I remove wood from the node of a specific pitch? Nothing, right? That part of the bar isn't vibrating. Whatever you do to it, it doesn't matter. Okay? Yeah, we'll see. We just talked about this. whereas shaping wood at the antinote of the first overtone affects the pitch of the fundamental because the fundamental doesn't have a node there. The fundamental has an antinode there, so we're raising or lowering that pitch, but there's a node, so it's not affecting the second one. Does that kind of make sense? Are we still following? Recap! How do we raise the pitch of the bar? Shaving wood on the outside, and what does that do? Lowers the mass, which raises the pitch. How do we lower the pitch of the bar? We shave from the middle, because what does that allow the bar to do? It makes it more flexible and it can vibrate at a slower rate. What happens to the pitch of a partial if we shave wood at its node? Nothing, because it's not shaking. It's not vibrating, right? Does that all make sense so far? How to tune the bar. Here's the slide, guys. We made it. So, first we're going to want to raise the fundamental and the overtones over the desired pitch. Who thinks they know why we need to raise both of them above the desired pitch? Think about what ones we can move individually and what ones move together, whether we're going up and down. Brody?
We can lower things individually, but we can only raise things together.
Yes. So we need to bring both above, because if I were to just do the fundamental and bring the fundamental above and then bring it into pitch, when I went to bring the overtone above and then bring it back down, the fundamental would be changing as well. So we want to bring both above so that we can bring them down individually to the desired pitch. Does that make sense? Okay. Then what we're going to do is we're going to lower the overtones to the desired pitch. Why do we want to lower the overtones but not the fundamental first?
Easier to hear the fundamentals?
It's easier to hear the fundamentals, but let's look at this diagram up here with the nodes and antinodes. So shaving wood anywhere that the bar vibrates for that fundamental or overtone affects it. It affects it most at the antinode. So if I were to shave wood for the fundamentals, see what the antinodes are in the second one there? I'm going to shave wood there. Is the fundamental vibrating in that spot? Based on the diagram? Yes, it's not an antinode, but it is still vibrating. So shaving wood there is going to lower both of them, because the bar is vibrating in both places. If I shave wood at the antinode of the fundamental to lower it, is the partial above that going to change? No, and why not?
Because it's not vibrating.
Because there's a node there, yes. So I can shave at the antinode for this second transverse mode and bring both of them down. The second mode is going to go down more, and then the other one will go down a little bit. And then we can bring the fundamental down without affecting the overtones because of the placement of those nodes and antinodes. Is that, we following still? Okay. Then we're going to lower the fundamental down to the desired pitch. Because again, moving the fundamental doesn't affect the overtones nearly as much, unless you shave in the wrong portion. Does that make sense? So what are we going to do first? Raise the fundamental and the overtones above what? Above the desired pitch. Then what do we bring down to the desired pitch first?
The second overtone?
The overtones, and then the fundamentals. Then we're going to repeat that process until we have it in tune. And again, when we hold it up to a tuner to hear the overtones in the tuner, we're going to pinch the middle and let it hear only that so that it doesn't hear the fundamental. We want to get both of those in tune. Frequently asked questions and some tricky review. What overtones do we tune on each bar? Yes, so the second transverse mode is responsible for 2 octaves above. This is something that I brought up. You're not going to know the answer to this question, sorry. This is one of the things that I found when I started tuning marimbas. I was doing really good when I got to the top octave, and all of a sudden I went to listen to the overtones, and it was like a half step lower, and I was like, oh, I have to shave off a lot of wood to get that overtone to be high enough. Generally on most student level, or even the marimbas that we have here, the lowest octave will tune all 3 modes. Because you know how partials work, the higher the fundamental is, the higher the overtones are, and then it gets to a certain point where we can't hear the overtones because they're too high. But on the lower notes, it's really easy to hear all 3, so we tune all 3. So we can hear it. Does that make sense? Then generally in the middle range, what we're going to do is tune the fundamental in the first set of overtones, which is 2 octaves above, because those are the ones we can hear. And then in the high range, they only tune the fundamentals. There's a specific reason for this that I did a lot of research to figure out and pretty much what it has to do, in order to get the arc correct for the fundamental, they're shaving too much wood for the overtones in the higher bars, so they're going way too low, but they want the strings to line up in the correct spot. So they sacrifice that overtone to have a marimba that looks consistent and correct throughout the whole thing. Why can't we just adjust that flat overtone on the higher notes by removing wood? If I know how to tune a marimba and I know how to raise the overtones, why don't I just shave off a bunch of wood? It'll affect the fundamental, but then I can bring them both down, right? This is what happens. This one we'll see, I purposely cut off a bunch. See how much extra wood and I trimmed off some on the side here? Come check this out. You want to see this. So I affected the mass of the bar so much. I only brought it up 56, not even the whole half stack. If I put salt on both of these spots again, we remember where these lined up with on the first bar, right? Right where the strings were? Because you want the strings to go where the fundamental's not vibrating. I've taken off so much wood. We'll see that the salt has moved in and it's no longer matching where the strings go. Why is that an issue?
Because now the antidotes are used.
Yes. So now the strings are a place where the fundamental is vibrating and it's going to dampen the bar. So either we can force a really high note that we're not going to hear the overtones in to be in tune and then have it dampen a bunch, or we can have it ring out and not have those overtones. Does that make sense? Yeah, we can see this up here. Those are two figures of the same bar back to back. You can see how much the salt moved. That's actually this bar right here. Yeah. I thought I deleted this out of this. That's my bad. What's the hardest part about tuning a Marimba? Having to retie all of the strings on every single bar. I added that as a joke when I was showing it to people here, but apparently I couldn't delete it. Thank you guys so much. Yeah, that's that. I'm going to give you guys, we have what, half an hour?
In half an hour, everyone's gonna get to try to tune marimba bars.
And any of this stuff too, while there's not space here. Again, yes.
Are we tuning to 440? A 440?
You're gonna so all of these are different pitches. So you're just gonna take it to your tuner and tune it, yeah, right at 440, right after the pitch.
And why again? Like, is every band director going to go around to their marimbas and be like, holy cow, like, my marimba's out of tune with my band?
Yes. So generally the marimba doesn't vibrate a lot because, or very long, like the other instruments do. So it's kind of hard to hear that being out of tune. But what else is on the marimba that helps the notes be louder?
The pipes.
The resonators. And what are the resonators there for? Yeah, they're for resonance. Are the resonators tuned to a specific note? Yes. They tune all the resonators to match the note of the bar. When the humidity changes, is this wood going to change?
Yeah.
Is that piece of metal going to change? No. So when all of these bars are 15 cents sharp, this is completely out of tune from the resonators now, and the resonators won't fully vibrate the fundamental. They won't make the fundamental be louder because there's such a big difference. So when you tune them, it'll actually allow the fundamental to ring out more.
So it's out of tune with itself, essentially.
Yes.
What happens.
Yeah.
Why are the manufacturers sending out marimbas?
So a part of it is the process of treating the wood, and then the other part
But
is
they know that, right? They know they're doing that to the bar.
yes. So the other side of it is they don't always know where the marimba is going to end up and what kind of humidity there is. We obviously have very, very low humidity here sometimes, and other places have very, very high. Like right now in the winter, we normally have a very low humidity, right?
Yeah, and if we weren't getting the physical plant to do stuff, we were registering 25%
Yeah.
one day. And I had to fight with the physical plant to get them to lift it so that we have 40%.
And also on some of the better super professional models, they'll tune more of the overtones, and they will probably wait longer for that wood to help it go like that. But the humidity changes so much of this bar and the pitch, whereas I don't think humidity necessarily, or it does change it in woodwinds, but we can move how far our mouthpiece, right? There's other things that we can do to affect the tone. We can't on the bar.
How long does this last? If you tune a marimba bar, how long does it stay in tune?
So if you're saying the same humidity, it should hopefully stay tuned for the rest of the time you have it, right? You shouldn't have to get them retuned more than once unless you're changing the place they are in the building for an extended period of time. The other thing is you can only tune a marimba so many times because you're removing wood every time.
Yes.
And what happens when we've removed a bunch of wood? Here I removed a lot of wood. This would be like tuning the marimba like 12 times. What happened to the nose change? So there's only so much that we can tune the marimba bar, especially on the low end where it's really thin in the middle. But yeah. Does that help answer? I think in a high school setting, it's really not as important. But when we're in college and we're in professional settings,
professional bands.
it just Mr. Biggs always talks about, right, the first 90% is generally the easiest. Like getting something 90% of the way good, but that last 10% takes 9 times the amount of time that the first 90% did, and this is that last 10%.
It's almost like it's a service that should come with the manufacturer, like, after
Well, also-
it spends a week in wherever it's gonna live, we'll come out and tune it for you.
Well, and also it just changes over time, right? Like it's what some of these marimbas are 60 years old, right? What is going to change after 60 years?
Wait till you hear this. How many people in the country know how to do this?
When Mr. Mix and I looked, not counting people that like work in the factories, but like people who like go out and tune people's marimbas, I think there was 12.
So that sounds like.
Yeah, and it's about $500 for a 5-octave marimba. And a lot of places, obviously, you can't do this in a band room because you're sanding a bunch of wood. So they'll take the bars off, put them in boxes, and then ship them to the person to tune them.
Go to a tech room.
And you timed yourself tuning an entire marimba. How long did it take you?
It took me 2.5 hours, but I would say that probably like an hour of that was trying to restrain it afterwards.
So about an hour and a half to tune a whole marimba. So about an hour and a half to tune a whole marimba, and you get paid $500.
Yeah. And again, like it's not something that like there's piles of marimbas waiting to be tuned, but when there's only 12 people, there's room for it, you know.
Synthetic bars.
I've never personally tuned synthetic bars because we don't have any here. To my understanding, it's the same process. Some of the synthetic bars that have holes in the end, I'm not sure how that affects where you're standing. You know what I'm talking about? Have you seen the ones with holes in the end? I'm assuming those holes are there.
That's the Yamaha install.
Yes, yeah. So I'm not sure with the ones with holes, but synthetic bars is the same properties because they're vibrating at the same time.
So I understand why you could argue a good case for like tuning for maybe like philharmonic orchestras, like professional players and that type of thing. Do you think that you could also argue that it would be beneficial to tune instruments for like marching band or indoor percussion because they're constantly changing communities? They're going indoors and outdoors, sometimes, on a bus to a different school, things change all the time. Would it be worth it to tune marimbas that are constantly in motion and like traveling?
I would say it is because, as we saw with a lot of the marimbas here, they're all 15 cents sharp, which is very, very sharp. Once you get them tuned, generally within normal humidity levels between like winter and summer, it's really only affecting it by 5 to 8 maybe. So when they're that far out of tune, it's definitely worth it because they might change a little bit. But
And if they're constantly in motion, maybe they're more apt to get out of tune in the first place. So
Yeah.
you could argue a good case to okay.
You said what they'll do occasionally is they'll ship, like they'll take all the bars off the marimba and ship them. Does that also affect the humidity of the bars?
So a lot of places that do it, I had some questions after I read all my research articles and I started doing it. And I actually reached out to a guy who does this professionally in California, and I talked to him about some stuff like that. They have some like special rooms where they tell them what humidity and they try to keep the rooms to that humidity, or some places just say we are tuning them in this level of humidity to let the people know.
So for people that don't know, when you are tuning it to try and get it into what range of like, it's okay if it's this many cents sharp and this many cents flat, or
You want to get it as close as you can. Generally within 1 second you're not going to hear, but if you're taking the time to take it apart and tune it, you want to get it exactly on. And yeah.
Is there an easy way to tell if it's composite or wood? Or synthetic or wood, whatever.
I don't have one here to show the example, but they're generally, it's pretty obvious when it's not a real bar.
Yamaha, they drill holes.
Yeah.
It's pretty obvious
They
that
don't
those are.
Yeah.
Musser uses they call it Kiwan, and it's like a fiberglass type material. I think the Acoustalon is as well, but it's pretty easy to tell that it's synthetic.
Yeah. Cool. Let's start tuning. I'm gonna help some people over here, and Natalie, who actually I showed how to tune a couple weeks ago, is gonna stay here now. You're welcome